Yes, Trae Young versus the Atlanta Hawks is the first clean, public proof that the NBA's new CBA can kill loyalty before it even starts. The headlines say a star wants his max, the team hesitates, and the fan base splits down the middle. But the real story here isn't ego or attitude. It's math. Since July 2023, the league's second-apron rules have made one decision cascade into 5 other penalties, and by September 17, 2025, multiple reports made it plain. Atlanta hadn't put a max extension on the table, and there were no plans to even talk extension this summer. That's not a snub. It's a strategy. The common belief is simple. If a franchise truly believes in its franchise player, you lock him up the second he's eligible. That used to be the easy button. But the second apron turned easy buttons into tripwires. You don't just say yes to a superstar number anymore. You say yes to losing trade tools, to freezing picks, to a hard ceiling on how you can fix mistakes. In that world, a max or bust demand becomes a team-building trap. You can love a player and still refuse the number because the number now handcuffs your future. Here's the contrarian take. Atlanta's stance is less about Trae's talent and more about the CBA's teeth. The Hawks roster is already expensive after adding Kristaps Porzingis in July and extending Jalen Johnson. One wrong contract tips them toward the second apron, where the penalties stack. You lose the mid-level exception entirely, you can't aggregate salaries in trades, you can't send cash, your future first 7 years out gets frozen. And if you live above that line too often, that first can get shoved to the end of the round. When the rules punish ambition, loyalty becomes leverage on both sides. Here's the plan tonight. First, what's actually happening between Trae and the Hawks right now, and what the credible reports really say. Second, why the second apron-specific penalties make a full-boat max extension feel reckless, even if you believe in Trae the player. Third, how the standoff likely ends, trade scenarios, timelines, and the money and power motives that decide who blinks. Along the way, we'll reference on-record reporting from early August through mid-September, the league's official 2025 to 26 apron levels, and the 2023 CBA rules that turn this from a vibe story into a cap story. Start with the present tense. As of mid-September 2025, the through line across reputable reporting is the same. There were no plans for extension talks this summer, and Trae's camp was disappointed the offer never came. That matters. Extensions aren't just about dollars, they're commitments from both sides about who you're building around and how. Atlanta didn't slam the door on Trae, what they did was keep the door open to every option. That's different. It's leverage. And it's exactly what the second apron incentivizes. Zoom out to the roster. Atlanta just publicly committed to being better right now by importing a 7-foot spacer in Porzingis and stacking veteran help around Trae. That's a win-now posture that usually triggers, okay, max your star. But look at the bill. Johnson's new money is real. Porzingis isn't cheap. Role players like shooters and switchable wings now cost 8 figures each. Throw in Trae's current deal with a looming player option, and you can see the slope. One aggressive raise pushes you out of the comfortable middle and toward the apron cliff. Under the old rules, you could overpay and clean it up later with a multiplayer trade or a mid-level signing. Under the new rules, you can't. If you cross the second apron, you lose the very tools you'd need to fix a misstep. That's where fans get whiplash. The casual take is pay the man. The modern front office take is, can we still maneuver if we're wrong? Because the second apron removes the safety net. You can't combine 2 mid-tier salaries to bring back 1 upper-mid contributor. You can't toss cash to grease a deal. You can't snag an impact buyout if the player's previous salary was above the non-taxpayer mid-level. If you live above the apron at season's end, your first-round pick 7 years out gets frozen, stuck in your drawer and off the trade table. And if you live there too often, that same first can get kicked to the very end of the round as a penalty. That's not luxury tax. That's roster jail. And the Hawks are trying very hard not to go there unless it's for a championship-level sure thing. Now add the human element. From Trae's perspective, he's carried heavy usage since year 2. He's produced all-star numbers, and he's watched peers sign massive extensions this summer. If you're Trae, no talks reads as doubt. If you're his agent, no talks reads as an opening. Push for leverage, test the trade market, and see who's willing to pay both the salary and the apron cost. That's not drama. That's negotiation inside a rule set designed to create friction between stars and their teams. The league engineered this tension to curb spending at the very top. We're watching the policy work exactly as intended. Now, the math that makes the standoff logical. The league set the 2025-26 second apron a little above $207 million. With Porzingis and Johnson in, the Hawks have some breathing room this season, but not much. Extensions for stars don't hit the books immediately, they start in the out years. But the second apron penalties don't care when the pain starts. They care whether your multi-year plan keeps you mobile. If you pencil Trae's next number at a full 30% max with 8% raises, and you project normal bumps to role player rates, you can easily see Atlanta trading off that slim margin to nothing by 2027. And by then, if they need to retool around him, aggregation's gone. Buyout options are tighter. The mid-level is gone. The pick 7 years out is frozen. You're stuck riding the same build because the rules won't let you change it fast. Front offices don't fear paying great players. They fear paying great players plus apron tax in the form of lost options. That's why the Hawks appear to be testing the middle path. Let the season play, keep both outcomes viable. If the team pops, Porzingis stays healthy, the defense climbs, and the offense hums, they can justify maxing Trae and living with narrower roads. If they flatten, they can pivot while they still have the tools the apron would otherwise take away. It's not romantic, it's rational. So what are Trae's counters? First, the raw value case. He's one of the league's most consistent volume creators, north of 24 and 9 for years running, and he bends defenses before the ball crosses half court. Second, the roster fit case. Adding Porzingis is actually a pro-Trae move. A floor spacer 5 with above-average rim protection is the exact big you want next to a heliocentric pick-and-roll guard. Third, the market case. Guards in his tier were rewarded this summer across the league. If your peers get the bag, standing pat starts to look like disrespect. Atlanta has counters to the counters. They can argue that their path to contention is about optionality, not just star power. They can point to the second aprons, silent taxes, and say, paying the max now could cost us 2 starters later because we can't make the trade that puts us over the top. They can remind everyone that even being close to the second apron can chill your moves. Agents know who's jammed, and prices go up when you're desperate. And they can frame the delay as performance aligned, deliver in May and June, and the number becomes much easier to swallow. Is a trade the endgame? Maybe. The second apron actually encourages it in 2 ways. First, it makes consolidation trades expensive for teams above the line. So a below-apron buyer can charge a premium in picks and prospects to take on a star. Second, it makes pre-apron planning valuable. So a team like Atlanta might choose to move early while they can still aggregate outgoing money, use trade exceptions, and include cash. The CBA didn't just cap spending, it reshaped timing. Smart teams do the big thing before they're trapped. That's why you're hearing play it out and reassess by the deadline from plugged-in voices. If the Hawks decide to reroute, early February becomes the window where their tools still work. What would a blueprint look like? You target a partner with apron headroom, surplus wings, and controllable picks, preferably one that values Trae shot creation in a way Atlanta can't replicate in-house. You demand a headliner young piece to keep the fanbase engaged, multiple firsts that aren't frozen, and contracts you can stack without losing flexibility. You'd also coordinate with Trae's camp for soft landing options, because the player option clock matters. That's not betrayal. That's operating under a system that rewards clean books more than sentiment. If you're looking for the one moment where loyalty died, it wasn't a quote or a cryptic tweet. It was the day the CBA codified the second apron. The rule was sold as parity, but its true power is leverage reallocation. It moved leverage from stars to spreadsheets. It tells owners, spend if you dare, but you don't just pay dollars, you pay in options. It tells GMs, do not miss. And it tells players, if you want to max on a team with other expensive pieces, be prepared to hear, not yet, even if they love you. That's the Hawks story in a sentence. So where does this land? The most likely short-term outcome is stalemate disguised as harmony. Trae plays. The Hawks market, prove it, competitiveness. If the early record is strong and Porzingis looks like the missing piece, the conversation softens, not because feelings changed, but because the cost of the apron looks more tolerable for a real contender. If they spin their wheels into January, the calculus flips. Optionality becomes the asset, and you cash it in while the rules still let you. Either way, the CBA did this. It engineered a world where staying together is the riskiest choice unless the team is truly great. And that's the bigger lesson for fans. Loyalty didn't vanish because stars got greedy or owners got cheap. It vanished because the league made flexibility the new currency and then charged a premium for it at the second apron. In that market, love is business, timing is power, and silence, like the Hawks' silence on a max, says more than any press conference ever will. Here's the final takeaway. If you want to understand the next 5 contract wars, don't look at points per game. Look at apron distance, frozen picks, and aggregation rules. That's how you predict who stays, who goes, and who wins. Tonight, Trae versus the Hawks just gave the rest of the league a blueprint. If you can't afford to be wrong under the second apron, you can't afford to be sentimental either. And if you want the uncensored playbook of how deals really get done behind the podium, jump to our Locker Room Confidential playlist next. We'll show you how agents, cap guys, and GMs game these rules in real time.